Night had enveloped the highway in a thick fog. The headlights of the car snatched only a narrow section of the road from the darkness, and beyond it the world turned into a continuous, viscous emptiness. John had been driving for several hours. The road was completely empty. No oncoming cars, no streetlights, only rare signs hidden in the shadows. When he saw a figure at the side of the road, he shuddered. A hitchhiker. A tall man in a dark raincoat, standing completely still. He did not wave his hand, did not make any sudden movements, simply looked in the direction of the approaching car. And yet, John clearly knew that this man wanted a ride. For a second he hesitated, his fingers tightened on the steering wheel, but the road ahead was empty. There was not a single gas station or settlement for many miles around. The man could not just be here. John stopped. The hitchhiker slowly stepped forward. Now, in the light of the headlights, he looked strange. His face was too pale, his eyes were too dark, his expression completely empty. He slowly opened the door and got into the passenger's seat. "Thank you," he said quietly, and his voice rang out in the silence, as if it didn't belong there. John nodded, but something inside him tightened. The road seemed longer now. The air in the car became heavy. The hitchhiker didn't move. He just looked straight ahead, and John felt that he had made a mistake. For several minutes, there was a drawn-out silence in the car. The hitchhiker sat motionless, looking at the road, as if he didn't care about anything around him. John watched him out of the corner of his eye, feeling an inexplicable tension. Maybe he was just paranoid? Maybe the guy really needed help? But then he spoke. "You've been driving for a long time," the hitchhiker said, without turning his head. John swallowed. "Yes, several hours already." The hitchhiker nodded slightly. "You're tired, your eyes are heavy." "A little, but I don't have far to go." The hitchhiker smiled, but his lips barely moved. "Have you been on this highway before?" "No." "You were." John glanced at him. The hitchhiker slowly turned his head. "You were here a few years ago." "No." John forced himself to smile. "This is my first time in this state." The hitchhiker looked at him silently, and then John felt a chill in his chest. "You don't remember," the hitchhiker finally said. "But I remember." John grabbed the wheel, trying to concentrate on the road. "What do you remember?" The hitchhiker looked in the side mirror. "Leaving me here." Something cold rolled down John's spine. He didn't know this man. He'd never seen him before. But his voice, there was something familiar about it. And the worst thing was that at that moment John realized that he couldn't remember what the hitchhiker had looked like a second ago. His face was blurring in his memory, as if he had never really existed, but he was here, so close, and he remembered John, and John didn't remember him. John didn't say another word. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The man was no longer looking at him. He was staring straight ahead again, but now his presence was stronger. It was as if the air in the car had grown thicker, as if the temperature had dropped. But at the same time, a cold sweat had broken out on John's forehead. There was an hour left until the nearest town. The light from the headlights was barely enough to pierce the thick darkness that seemed to be squeezing the car. John felt that he was not alone on this road, as if someone else was walking beside him, invisible, but watching his every move. When the first headlights appeared in the distance, John felt a sense of relief. The city, the people, close. He blinked and, without turning his head, glanced at the man out of the corner of his eye. He had not moved. He had not made a sound. But when John blinked again, he was gone. An empty seat. The door was closed. No sound of opening. No movement. Just emptiness. His heart was pounding loudly in his chest. John slammed on the brakes, gasping for breath, looking around. "Where are you?" The car was empty. But then he happened to glance in the rearview mirror, and he saw himself, standing on the side of the same road, hitchhiking in the dark, just like the man he'd picked up. John recoiled, nearly hitting the steering wheel. His vision went blurry. His consciousness trembled, as if something was surfacing from the depths of his memory. fragments of thoughts, the crack of breaking metal, the taste of blood in his mouth, the cold of the asphalt beneath his back, and someone's voice. "You left me here." John knew the truth, and that night he was no longer the one driving. Now he was standing on the side of the road, waiting for the next driver, waiting for someone to stop and pick him up. Like he had once done. Like he was supposed to do again.